to the Tough Fish Show. I am so excited to bring to you P.A. DePaul. P.A., thank you so much for being on the show. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you so much for having me. And please, please, please call me Penny.
Oh, absolutely. Well, Penny, I am so glad you're here. Let me try that again. Welcome to the Tough Fish Show. I am so excited to bring to you Penni DePaul.
Hello.
So with that, how did you get into writing?
Well, a long time back in 2009,
Mm-hmm.
I was an avid reader of J.R. Ward. And at one point, she wrote this compendium. And I swear in this compendium that she had that went with all the books that she had out, there was a piece in there about listen to your Rice Krispies. And I'm probably blurring all this together, so I apologize, J.R. Ward, if I get you wrong. But it was about writing. And she just encouraged everybody, if you think you can write it, just try it. And at least you'll have a book maybe you want to read. And I was like, okay, well, I'm an avid reader. I love to read. Maybe I'll try this writing thing. And I went to bed that night, and the next morning I woke up with 2 characters and an idea. I'm like, okay, now what? I don't know how to write a book from beginning to end. I've seen it. I've read it. I know what I like and what I don't like. Oh, what do I do from here? So then I started researching how to write, and Writer's Digest had a class, how to write a novel. Click. I'm going to sign up for this class. And there was a very good instructor there. She wrote sci-fi, a lot of short stories, and it was a kind of all people from all walks of life in this class. And I'm trying to tell this story about this guy. He's like in what we call new adult now, early 20s, who finds out that there's a whole life beyond death. And he's trying to learn how to become not necessarily an angel, but he'll have all the angel properties. And he's going to be sent back down on Earth to fight demons. And it's all that he goes through on how to figure out how do you use your wings, how do you talk people mind to mind. And it's just, I did so much stuff for this poor character. It was so much fun. And I kept putting this in the class, and she kept saying, this needs to be a romance. And I was like, but it's not a romance. It's about his journey and figuring out there's this whole thing on this other side of life. And she's like, needs to be a romance. And I was resistant at first. Don't ask me why, because I love romance. I read a billion romance. I don't know why. And then she goes, but think of the conflicts. Now my antennas are going up. I love conflict because now you got to put another person in there who's also, maybe they've got to figure out that there's another side to life, or maybe they're, competing for something. And now I'm like, ooh, that's a lot of fun. So I scrapped that book, and I continued and kept writing until I'm like, okay, I think I might have something that I brought from beginning to end. And after 300 pages, I realized there really is no end. Okay, let me go right back to the beginning again and start over. And then ultimately, what I came up with was my very first published book back in 2013 by a very small press. It was adult. It was a group of guardians who, they have angelic powers, but because they were human, they're not going to become angels, but they'll have angel-like powers, and they fight demons. And there was this human that's caught in between this battle. So I'm like, okay, now I'm going to go to these conferences. I'm going to talk to these agents and these editors. They're going to love me. They're going to love my book. They're going to want it. And everybody looked at me and they're like, it's a really cool concept, but we don't know where to market it. Because it's not paranormal, because it doesn't have witches or Dracula or whatever, vampires and everything. And it's not urban fantasy because it's not apocalyptic or anything. They're like, we don't know where to put this, which is ultimately why I ended up going with this really small press. So then I'm like, okay, my next book, I am going to write in a genre that there will be no qualm. You are going to know this is romantic suspense. It's not going to be blending anything together. And then that's when I came up with my SBG series, which is about a Black Ops squad. And I met my agent at a conference, and she was like, I love this. And before we and her actually got signed, I had received an offer from a publisher, And I went back to her and said, okay, I've got an offer on the table. Will you be my agent? And ultimately we're like literally 3 days apart in age. So we're like dancing and we're, doing the Snoopy dances and stuff. So we got signed, and she ended up selling the book to Penguin, the series to Penguin. She took it to an even bigger publisher. And in 2014 and 2015, the SBG books came out. But then the publishing world had to shift. There was a big shift that started happening then, and that was when the self-publishing was coming to the forefront. And publishers were starting to tighten their belts, and because they were like seeing it on the horizon, and then they decided not to pick up the rest of the series. And they had also done digital first with it, so there was no paperback or anything. And then they had also, in the publishing world, it's hard to get marketing dollars unless you're a very big author. Generally smaller authors, you do your own marketing, and I'm so brand new, nobody knows who I am, so I'm floundering here. And I asked my agent if she would get the rights back for me, and she did. And then I was hoping to sell it to a new house, but by this point the publishing world went through that whole just big turnover where they just completely tightened all their belts. They let some of their authors go. Self-publishing really started to become more of a norm than it was before. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to try the self-publishing route, because what do I know about how to put a book out? I needed a really good editor to tell me that's not going to fly with just as much on the line as I had. They needed to work just as much as I do, and I needed somebody to have that same level of commitment. But just this past year, I decided I want my series to go out. So that's when I started to put out this. There it is. That one's first. And this one, oh my goodness, this is harder than I thought. This one is going to come out, or just came out. And these are the two books that were with Penguin, and I've re-edited them because 2014 and 2015 technology has changed a lot. And my writing has changed, hopefully for the better. So I kind of re-edited them, re-put it out. Now I can put the whole series out. And in the meantime, I also got a contract with Harlequin to write a set of books for them. So I kind of had nothing, and then I had a lot.
So you have hit on so many things that I am super excited about. But one of the things you mentioned, and just in case we have listeners who are not watching the video, you pointed to a couple of books. Could you mention their names really quickly?
The first book that I pointed out to was a whole brand new cover, everything, called Exchange of Fire in the SBG series. And the second book is Shadow of Doubt.
Very cool. Very, very cool. Awesome. Awesome. So, oh my gosh, so many cool things were coming up to me as you were chatting and explaining kind of like the journey and the changes that you went through, and the growth that you went through too. And, one of the things you mentioned was like, how you got to work with one of the big five. I mean, really, you got to really be able to be a part of that type of environment. Do you have any tips or suggestions for an author who has their sights on being able to work with one of the top four, I believe now?
I will say that I love being I guess they call hybrid authors, where you're both. We have traditional and self-publishing. I will say I'm very glad that I went the traditional route first. This is just a personal thing, because they taught me so much. They have such levels of editing. Not only do you have, my agent gets involved with editing, and that's not usual. Some agents are just there for the contracts or to give you opportunities, but mine, she gets involved in my editing. So I have her round, my editor's round, the copy editor's round, the second copy editor's round, the proofreader's round, the final round. So there's 6 rounds of editing that we hope we catch everything through. And through all of that, they're teaching me, because I could not put a comma in this right space to save my life. So thank God they're doing it for me. So when I'm trying to memorize, why does that work there in a sentence or whatever they're showing me, But I also, for those authors that are out there who were like, oh, I really wouldn't mind getting into that, you know, traditional realm. If you go to a conference, if you happen to be lucky to, the conferences are starting now to go out and about. They're starting to happen again since COVID. You, and you have an opportunity to meet with an editor, do it. Just do it, because you find that they are truly just people. They're really just people sitting there. They really want to hear your story. 9 times out of 10, they'll at least take the first 3 chapters, and you've gotten your foot through the door. You've gotten somebody who in Penguin or in Avon or wherever you're targeting, you know, to look at your book, and they may give you feedback, they may not, but you had that experience where you got to sit down in front of that editor and at least tell them a story.
I love that. I love that so much. And really what I hear you saying is another form of being visible, another form of
Yes,
putting yourself out there. And especially in doing so face to face. I mean, it's one thing to use a submission program or to
yes,
send an email or what have you. It's another thing to be face to face with that person. And you know, there's an excitement, and then there's the, oh my goodness, I hope they are gentle if they don't like it. But in the same breath,
yes,
they realize, they truly realize that this is something really brave for you to do, that you have, it was brave to put words on a page to create this story, and yet you've done more bravery by showing up and saying, I'd like you to look at this, I think this is has merit to move forward, and I'd like, what do you think about it being with you, or what do you think about
right,
this? All of
right.
that is brave. And so remembering that the person on the other end does see that, you know.
And they're just, and they've confided in me because I've been in this business now since 2009. We won't really calculate how many years that is. I've gotten to know some of them by sight, so we can just say, "Hey, how are you?" You know, we'll just do names, and they've confided that they're just as nervous. They
Sure.
don't know who is sitting down on the other side. They have no clue what you're about to say, and they're just as nervous that they give the right expression, or that they say the right thing, or they're asking the right questions to bring out, because they know you're nervous, because they are too, you know, to bring out the story that you came to tell them.
Yes, I love
Yeah.
that so much, Penny. I love that so much. Yeah, yeah. So going back to another thing you mentioned earlier, which was like, I loved hearing about this, and I would love for us to dig even deeper into it, is basically tension and conflict, to build that within the story. And even if you're not writing, something that you naturally think of tension happening in a thriller, in suspense, in action, simply because that's the nature of what that's a big part of what's driving that book. It also happens in romance. It also happens in memoir. It happens in so many other genres because it's a driving force of what's helping to move the character, move the reader through the book, and grow them and build them. So, I mean, oh, be still my heart when you said that. I was like, yay, I love that. So I would love for you to talk a little bit about when you're writing your characters. Let's say you're working on a piece, and do you initially see what's coming up? Like, do you initially realize I've got this main character going on, and I think he feels a little flat and he's not really going the way I want. So that's when you realize you want to add more conflict and tension, or is something else happening that's triggering this for you? Like, what are some indicators that help you to realize you need to amp that up?
Yeah. So when I write a book, I am what I like to call a plantser. I don't write by the seat of my pants, but I don't outline to death. I'm right in between. To write romantic suspense, you have a minimum of 3 conflicts. You're going to have your story conflict. What are they trying to solve? What are they trying to stop? What are they trying to do? And then you each of the hero and the heroine a minimum, probably even a fourth, because I like villains. So we're going to
Me
say 4
too.
conflicts. And I really love to write the villain's point of view. But they have a reason why they're not romantically involved, either with the hero or in general. So you've got a conflict there in each one. So now we've got 3 conflicts. And then you've got your villain.
Yeah.
He's not just this black character who does evil because he should. we need them in the book. I like to write villains that are almost identifiable. You see why they've turned villainous. Because if the story was set in their point of view, they would be the hero.
Yes.
They're always the hero of their own story. So I try to give the reader why they are the way they are. Hopefully I've done my job. And in The Shadow of Doubt, I had actually 5 conflict lines. And that one almost killed me because there was so much going on that I was like, how am I going to wrap all this up? And that book that topped out at almost 140,000 words, which I know that to authors, we go by words and readers go by pages. We'll just say readers, that's over 400 and some odd pages. It's a lot. So maybe it's close to 500, depending upon your font or whatever. So editor and I are trying to get this thing down as much as we can, you know. And when I realize the character's going flat, it's because I've already gone off, not necessarily what I thought I was going to do, because sometimes things I don't realize should happen in the story. They just happen naturally. And I'm like, oh, that's good. I didn't even know I knew this. Let me write this more. And then we're going to go in this direction. But somewhere along the way, I did disservice to one of the characters, and I have to go back and find where it is. And once I figure that out, the conflict then naturally will come out, and then I realize, oh, no, I've got to either have them in a firefight, or they need to either be, you know, really their lives are in jeopardy somehow, or, you know, they're going to really screw something up and make it all worse, you know. And you know, I love conflict.
Well, but what I'm hearing too are a few things. First off, is the importance of developing very strong villain, very strong, whatever, even if the villain isn't an actual character, but a thing you're bumping up against, it needs to be as strong, as formidable, as smart as your main characters, because otherwise your main characters are not getting challenged enough. And
Right.
so I definitely, I think that that's great. I very much do. How do you help to strengthen your villain?
I've got a very evil imagination. Was I not supposed to say that out loud? Let me see. Now, sometimes I'll take it from, could be from a news story, could be 10 years ago, could be, you know, what's happening out there now, and then I'll twist it. Because I don't want exactly what happened out there, because I'm not trying to write a biography and make it fiction, but I'll try to use that like high concept, and then I'll twist it so that it fits what I'm trying to do with the story, and then I'll twist it in another way. So like I said, you would understand how my villain got caught up in what he did or he is currently doing, even though it's evil. He does need to be stopped. But you'll get how he got there.
You basically are putting an element of humanity in him.
Yeah.
Into the villain. What makes a strong villain, a believable villain, really, is the fact that there is some humanity there. That and that's the thing that's kind of touching on a nerve in that respect too, because that's the thing that also helps you to want to root for the main characters, to say we've got to stop this, because you really kind of see what's happening, and it's like, no, dude, you're not supposed to be doing that. What are you doing, bad guy or bad girl? What is going on? No, this is not what's happened here. So I really love how you said that. Now I'm curious, do you interview your characters? Do you do any kind of like individual character development as you are creating them? Yeah.
Individual character development, I do. I use OneNote personally. I just switched over to that. I used to use Visio, which I know is an odd thing to use, but it allowed me to, I'm a visual person. If you were to see my desk, I literally have 5 monitors, large monitors on my desk, because I like to see it all around me. So I will almost have a conversation with my character. Usually when a story hits me, it's a character that's hit me first. It's not a storyline. I usually get introduced to the hero or the heroine first. And then I'm like, why? Why are you a black ops person, or why are you a police officer, or whatever.
Mhm.
And then I just keep drilling down, drilling down, drilling down. And I'll even go out on Pinterest or whatever and even come up with a likeness. So that way I match it throughout the rest of the book. And then I can say, hey, this is what I was envisioning when I do that. But no, I do kind of almost interview them in my head.
Yeah.
Why are you this way?
Now you mentioned something else, and speaking of visual, I am too. And so going back to what you said earlier with having like 5 different conflict lines going on the last book. So the different elements, how did you keep that straight?
I actually had a timeline that I built in Visio that allowed me to see all 5 conflicts and when I was bringing them out and when the villain was coming in. And I also had a sheet that allowed me to see whose point of view each chapter is, because I do multi-point of views, and the villain also gets a point of view when I'm allowed.
Mhm.
Not all the editors would allow me to put a villain point of view, but when I'm allowed, so it would allow me to see, oh, we haven't heard from the villain in a while. Let's check in with him. Or no, I'm too weighted on the heroine. We need to see the hero. So that also helped me keep their personal conflicts as well as the story conflicts straight by having it all mapped out with whose point of view was with which chapter.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I was visualizing something like that. Like if it was a spreadsheet or if it was literally like, you know, parchment paper, not parchment, but like, drawing paper really, or a dry erase board or something
Right.
where you've drawn it, you're drawing it, you're mapping it, you're checking it off. So, I mean, yeah, I could easily see that happening, at least in my own world too. So when I'm editing somebody else's, I'm drawing quite a lot to kind of make sure is this, am I capturing this the way I think, like, what do I see? And that helps me also. So I love that you said that you do that. That is fantastic.
I'm sure
That
some
is,
people use maybe post-it notes. The pink one is
mhm,
maybe the heroine, and the blue one is the hero, and the orange is the villain. That would work too.
yep. Yep.
Anything to keep you. I color, like I said, visual. So color helps me. So in that box that I created for each POV, it's a color. So even if
Yeah.
I'm not paying attention to the quick 3 or words or whatever that summarizes the chapter, I'm like, oh, that was hero. Oh, we've missed the villain. Gotta bring it out.
So to your point earlier, when you said the manuscript was like 140,000 and you and your agent or editor were working through to cut it in a sense to get it a little bit down. I mean, and that's relative of what that is, because sometimes it's a matter of how much do you need to rework. It's not just I can cut this section or this subplot. It's when I do that, I am now reworking some pieces to make it
Right.
blend. Yeah. So
Yes.
how did you identify what could stay and what could go?
I relied on my editor the first time around because I was so close to the story. I had
Yeah.
just finished living in it for like 6 months. It was like, I breathed this thing. I slept with this thing. It was I'm eating with this thing. So I couldn't see it. I couldn't see what may be easy and quick cuts and what we need to keep, but maybe if we pare it down, or maybe we blend these chapters, because that's some of the things that we did too. Well, we couldn't cut it, but maybe we could just make it as tight as possible and blend.
Yeah.
And then once she gave me her spots, I would go through, work on what she's doing, and then knowing as I now have to rework the rest of the book, and sometimes up to that point, because I have to, if we're changing something completely, well, it can't just come out of the blue. So I have to introduce what's coming, or at least foreshadow maybe what's coming.
Mhm.
So it's really reworking the book from beginning to end. And I'm knowing, okay, I have to cut. I have to get lean and mean. I have to cut. So
I
some of
really,
that will come out.
yeah, I like the way you put that, lean and mean, but basically you're tightening the story. It could come down to how can this one sentence get structured so that you've cut, half of the words in a sense to get to the same point, but it just you got there faster, or you created the tension or the effect you were looking for because you punctuated it differently. You used different words to do that, or what have you. Yeah, I love how you're describing that, because you're
Right.
right that so many of the drafts that you work on up until that point, it's really getting the story out. It's getting the concept out. It's making sure that you have all the pieces you think you need. And then when you're going back through and seeing structure, that's great. And when you think the structure is good, and then you're going, okay, does it still work at these, is it where I want it to be? Then you're starting to push down into, okay, am I concerned about the word count? How do I start getting the line editing happening in there, and the voice and so forth? So it's so, I love how you describe that so much. Penny, this has like been so awesome and so much fun. Thank you so much. How
Great.
can people connect with you? How can they get more in your world and get your books?
Well, I try to be everywhere on social media, and then I say that, and all of a sudden there's like 5 social media sites I didn't even know about. So I'm in what I consider the top ones that I know about. I'm on Facebook under PA DePaul. I'm on Instagram under PA DePaul. I'm on TikTok. I don't do it well, but I try. I'm on TikTok under PA DePaul Author. I also have my website, which has all the links to everywhere. And my books are sold everywhere. So,
And
and the links are there.
what's your website?
It's padepaul.com. I tried to make it as easy as possible.
Yes, and I love that. I love that. Penny, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you.